He stood toe-to-toe with Achilles, a battle so equal the gods themselves could not decide. Yet while Achilles' name echoes in eternity, the story of this African king is now barely a whisper. The epic poem detailing his life, the Aethiopis, was mysteriously lost, burying the legacy of this great warrior. Right, we know him as Memnon, but who was the man, the king, and the hero? To understand the hero, one must first understand the man. Sorum, and the man was forged in a land the Greeks considered the very edge of the known world. Shiafirchon. This was the land of Ethiopia, a realm that appeared in Greek records as a place of legend. It was a kingdom located far to the south, nestled where the sun descends, a vast territory east of the Great Nile River, stretching toward the Red Sea. Ancient writers like Herodotus spoke of it with a sense of awe. Suktur, where the south descends toward the setting sun, lies the country called Ethiopia, he wrote. It is the last inhabited land in that direction. This was not a barren waste, but a land of mythical abundance. There, gold was obtained in great quantities, dug from the earth like common stone. Enormous elephants, larger than any seen in the north, moved through the ancient forests. Wild trees of every class and kind, including the dark, heavy heartwood of ebony, were plentiful. And the men, Herodotus claimed, were taller and longer lived than anywhere else. Its inhabitants, the Ethiopians, were recorded even before the land itself had a fixed geography in the Greek mind. Writers like Homer, lacking the precise knowledge of their successors, imagined them as distant, pious people, dwelling at the very confines of the world, so respected that the gods themselves would visit their feasts. Awari, this kingdom, seemingly outside the boundaries of the known world, was not originally ruled by Memnon. The throne belonged to his elder brother, Amathion. Sojourner Memnon was the second son, a prince in a land of shimmering heat and river-fed abundance. He spent his youth not seeking war, but learning the stewardship of his kingdom. But this peace was not to last. The royal brothers were not purely of this earth. They were given a Greek mythological origin. They were considered the sons of Tithonus. Tithonus, in his turn, was the son of the Trojan king Laomedon. This made Memnon and Amathion grandnephews of Priam, a distant but undeniable blood connection to the fortress city of Troy. Laomedon, their grandfather, was a ruler of tragic repute, a man who had famously cheated the gods and who was said to have met his end at the hands of Heracles during the generation before the Great Trojan War. It was this same Heracles, the quintessential Greek hero, who would bring tragedy to Ethiopia. The chronicles are sparse, the details lost like the Aethiopis itself, but the outcome was clear. Heracles, on one of his legendary journeys, traveled deep into the Nile Valley. There, an engagement occurred, a confrontation between the Greek hero and the Ethiopian king. It was there that Heracles proceeded to end the reign of Amathion. The news arrived in the capital not as a declaration, but as a slow dawning horror. Chotur, Memnon the prince, found himself standing before his brother's empty throne. The kingdom was his. It is here, in this crucible of sudden grief and immense responsibility, that Memnon, Emathian's brother, steps into history and becomes the new king of Ethiopia. Of his early reign, the truth is that not much is known. However, the sources available to us are vague, often contradictory, or shrouded in the same legendary mist that covered his homeland. But the threads that do exist all weave the same image. They speak of Memnon as a great king. He ruled not with the iron fist of a tyrant, but with the steady hand of a steward. He consolidated his power along the Nile, his authority respected by those who saw him as the rightful heir. He learned the hard lesson his brother's fate had taught him. The world was larger than Ethiopia, and the heroes of the civilized lands were forces of nature, capable of immense creation and devastating destruction. He reigned in this distant, golden kingdom, a king of a people deemed mythical, watching the world from afar. Then the world came for him. A ship, battered and weary, arrived from the north. Pusit had carried messengers from his granduncle Priam of Troy. Wechtununna, they brought tales of an outrage, the abduction of Helen, the gathering of 1,000 Achaean ships in a great war that had erupted on the shores of Asia Minor. The legendary War of Troy had begun. The conflict was between the invading Achaean coalition, led by the Messenian king Agamemnon, and the city of Troy, led by Priam and his dozens of allies. When the war first broke out, the Ethiopian king, bound by the blood of Laomedon, naturally sided with the Trojans. He owed them his allegiance, a debt of kinship passed down from his father Tithonus. Memnon, the great king, gave his word. He would come. He slowly began to gather his forces. When this was no simple task. Where he was not mustering a small raiding party, he was preparing a royal expedition, an army worthy of a king, drawn from the vast reaches of his domain. He gathered his finest warriors, the tall men Herodotus spoke of, clad in armor and carrying spears tipped with the sharpest obsidian. He organized contingents of chariots and supplies of gold to fund the alliance. And he prepared for a journey of unimaginable length. His kingdom was located so far away, a world apart from both Greece and Asia Minor, that the logistics of this movement were staggering. Memnon's forces had to traverse deserts, cross seas, and march through lands that were themselves embroiled in their own conflicts. Because of this vast distance, Memnon took a considerable amount of time to come to the aid of his principal ally. The war raged on without him. And years passed. Icromond. The Achaeans and Trojans bled each other dry on the plains of Ilion. Great heroes rose and fell. The stalemate hardened, and the ditches outside the Trojan walls filled and were filled again. Back in Troy, as the years ground on, hope for the Ethiopian contingent began to fade. It would be only toward the very end of the war, after nearly a decade of brutal fighting, that the Ethiopian contingents finally approached Troy. They arrived at the city's darkest, most desperate hour. Priam and the other Trojan leaders, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion, had begun to question if their distant, powerful ally would ever arrive at all. The situation on the battlefield had become grim, almost hopeless for the defenders of Ilion. The great protector of the city, Priam's son Hector, had been struck down by the Achaean champion, Achilles. His body had been desecrated, dragged behind a chariot in a fit of rage, and only recently recovered by King Priam in a desperate, humbling act of supplication. With Hector gone, the spirit of Troy was broken. Sumatran, worse still, the greatest Achaean hero, the seemingly invincible Achilles, was back among the ranks of Agamemnon, his wrath unleashed. King Priam, his throne room cold and his hopes shattered, was desperate for reinforcements of any kind. He prayed for a miracle, for any sign that the gods had not utterly abandoned them. And then the watchman on the South Tower cried out. Henri, it was not a cry of attack, but of disbelief. A new army was on the horizon, marching not from the sea, but from the land. They came in the form of thousands of soldiers, a vast host moving with disciplined purpose. They were led by none other than Memnon of Ethiopia. The gates of Troy were thrown open. The city, which had known only grief for months, erupted in a sudden, frantic wave of joy. The king of Ethiopia, the legend from the end of the world, had come. The Trojan king, seeing this, felt a lifetime of weight lift from his shoulders. He organized a great banquet in Memnon's honor. The great hall, long silent, was filled with light and music. Wine flowed. Food, hoarded for the endless siege, was brought out in abundance. During the dinner, Priam, his eyes bright with tears and relief, let himself be carried away by the sheer enthusiasm of the moment. He raised his cup, his voice booming across the hall, and declared that Memnon would be the one.
With the defense of our great city.
Memnon would save Troy. The hall cheered, the sound desperate and defiant. Memnon, however, remained humble. He sat at Priam's side, a figure of calm strength amid the forced celebration. Sonarm, he had seen the faces of the Trojan soldiers. He had seen the weariness in their eyes and the fresh scars on the city walls. Fironi, he had heard the whispers of Achilles' name, spoken like a curse. He inclined his head to the aged king, his voice steady and clear, not seeking to dampen the hope, but to ground it in reality. Memnon manifested his hope that his force would contribute to the Trojan effort.
Would contribute.
But he also showed himself to be cautious of any celebration before the battle had even been joined. He knew what awaited them on the field. And he knew that the man who had laid Hector low would be waiting for him. One night of feasting passed, giving way to a cold gray dawn. The alarm sounded from the walls. The Achaeans, having seen the arrival of the new army, were forming their lines. They would not give the Trojans time to truly recover. They intended to crush this new hope before it could take root. Suryi. When the day of battle arrived, Memnon gathered his numerous contingents in the main square of Troy. His soldiers were a stark contrast to the weary Trojans. Their armor was polished, their spears were sharp, and their eyes were bright. They moved with the energy of a force fresh to the fight. Memnon mounted his chariot, his own armor dark as ebony, inlaid with Ethiopian gold. On Wasui, he gave the order, and his forces marched out alongside the remaining Trojan forces and the rest of their allies. Shionrasuro, the Trojan force was a desperate but formidable coalition. It included the main contingents of Troy itself, now led by the Prince Paris, who had brought this doom upon his city, but still fought to defend it. And beside them was another band of legendary allies, the fierce warrior women, the Amazons, led by their queen, Penthesilea. She too had come from a distant land to aid Priam. She and Memnon exchanged a nod of mutual respect. They were the outsiders, the foreign blood come to defend another's home. Ashen. On the opposite side of the field, the Achaean host was a sea of bronze and horsehair plumes. They were led by the High King Agamemnon, as well as a great number of their most seasoned heroes. There was Diomedes, the ferocious. There was the great Ajax, a tower of muscle and hide. And there in his new divine armor was the man all Troy feared, the mighty Achilles. The horns blew. The two forces paused, a great terrible silence falling over the plain. Then with a roar that shook the gods on Olympus, they charged. When the two forces collided, the impact of Memnon was felt immediately. This was not just another band of ragged allies. This was a fresh, disciplined, and powerful army. The Ethiopian contingent, with Memnon at its head, struck the Achaean wing like a thunderbolt. The Achaeans, accustomed to the weary Trojan defenses, were stunned by the ferocity and skill of these new warriors. Memnon's men began to cause hundreds of casualties, pushing the Greeks back toward their own ships. A cheer went up from the walls of Troy. The hope that Priam had declared at the banquet seemed to be materializing. However, on the opposite side of the battlefield, a different, more terrible drama was unfolding. There the great Achilles had met the charge of the Amazons. He had sought out their queen, Penthesilea. The two had engaged in a ferocious duel, but the Achaean hero's strength was too great. Achilles had finished off Penthesilea and shattered her Amazonian band. The news of her fall spread across the field, dampening the Trojans' newfound hope. Memnon heard the roars of victory from Achilles' position. He saw the Amazonian banner, which had flown so proudly, topple and disappear into the chaos. Shuana. It became clear to Memnon in that instant that this battle would not be won on the flanks. It did not matter how many Achaean soldiers his men cut down. As long as Achilles was on the field, he was an unstoppable force, a one-man army who could and would counter every Trojan gain. A cold realization settled upon the king of Ethiopia. If he wanted to win this battle, if he truly wanted to give victory to the Trojans and save the city of Priam, he would have to do the one thing no man had ever accomplished. He would have to kill the mighty Achilles. Memnon roared an order to his lieutenants, entrusting them with the continued assault on the Achaean wing. He then turned his chariot, the wheels churning the blood-soaked mud, and directed it toward the center of the battle. He cut a path through the chaos, his target singular, his focus absolute. Achilles, fresh from his victory over the Amazon queen, saw him coming. The greatest Achaean hero recognized a true equal. He saw the dark armor, the golden chariot, and the aura of command that radiated from the Ethiopian king. He too moved to meet the challenge. The chaos of the general battle seemed to recede, the noise fading to a dull roar as the two greatest heroes on the plain finally converged. The great battle between the two heroes began. It was a fight that would be spoken of for ages. Unlike so many others before him, unlike the mighty Hector who had been forced to flee, the king Memnon stood firm. He did not yield a single step. He fought against Achilles face to face and blow for blow. Memnon's spear met Achilles' shield, the impact ringing out like a smith's hammer. Achilles' own spear, the mighty Pylian ash, was turned aside by Memnon's skill. They dismounted, their chariots wheeling away, and took to their swords. The clang of bronze on bronze was so rapid, so ferocious, that sparks flew from their blades. The heroes were said to be so evenly matched, their skill, strength, and courage in such perfect balance, that even the gods watching from on high were undecided on the winner. Hence, Zeus himself held his golden scales aloft, and for a long time, the fates of the two heroes hung in perfect equilibrium. Memnon was proving the impossible. He was proving that a mortal, a man from the confines of the world, could indeed be the equal of the divine-born, seemingly invincible Achilles. But the fates are cruel, and destiny cannot be denied forever. Although Memnon demonstrated that his skill and courage were practically equal to those of Achilles, the Achaean hero, fueled by a life of nothing but war, finally gained the upper hand. It was not a failing of Memnon's spirit or his strength. It was a single fleeting opening. A moment of overextension, a slight shift in balance as Memnon parried a devastating blow. Achilles, with the supernatural speed for which he was famous, saw the opening. He did not hesitate. When Achilles finally prevailed, he lunged forward, bypassing Memnon's shield. He thrust his spear into the one place his dark armor could not protect. Achilles stabbed Memnon in the heart with his spear. A great collective gasp rose from both armies. The entire battlefield fell silent. Memnon's body, which had been a whirlwind of motion, suddenly stopped. His sword, which had moved like lightning, fell from his grasp. He looked down, not in pain, but in a kind of profound surprise. He looked up, past Achilles, toward the distant walls of Troy, the city he had crossed the world to save. And the king of the Ethiopians found his end. He fell to the blood-soaked earth, and with him fell the last true hope of Troy. The The battle, which had been so fiercely contested, simply ended. The Ethiopian forces, seeing their king fall, let out a wail of grief so profound that it chilled the Achaeans. Their spirit was broken. The Trojans, witnessing the death of their second and last great champion, fled back to the city in a disorganized rout. Achilles, breathing heavily, stood over the body of the man who had almost defeated him. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a weary respect for the greatest warrior he had ever faced. He allowed the Ethiopians to retrieve their king's body, a sign of honor he had not granted Hector. This battle, this monumental duel, as well as the events that followed, were described extensively in the Ethiopies. This was a series of epic poems composed in the 7th century before Christ that took up the story of the Trojan War immediately after the events of the Iliad. It was this poem that was the true testament to Memnon's life, his journey, his reign in Ethiopia, and his heroic end. Makun, but lamentably the greatest tragedy of all, beyond his death on the field, is that the vast majority of this poem's content was lost to history. We are left only with fragments, summaries, and references from later writers. His full story, the true voice of his epic, was erased by time. And so, the man who was Achilles' equal in life became a footnote in his legacy. The war, of course, would claim its final victims. Erewhon, the own Achilles, the man who had prevailed against Memnon, would himself die in the very same battle. His reign of terror finally ended. He was struck by the arrows of Paris, the prince who had started the war, finding his own mortal vulnerability at last. Paris, too, would find his own death soon after, a fitting end for the man who brought ruin to his home. The war, which had consumed heroes, kings, and entire nations, finally resulted in the total destruction of Troy. The great city was taken by deceit, its walls burned, its people scattered. Afrodine, Memnon, the loyal king, the humble hero, had died for a cause that was already doomed. His story is one of loyalty, of courage, and of a greatness that transcended the narrow confines of the Greek world. Shomekini, he is the first great African hero of this mythology, a man who came from the edge of the world to prove that heroism knows no geography. And his legacy, though whispered, endures, a testament to the lost epic of the Ethiopian king.
To the lost epic.
Shiwanarina, the tragedy of Memnon, is not simply his death, but the silencing of his story. Mawinam, the Ethiopis, was his truth, the chronicle of his people and his name, and its loss means we must piece him together from the scraps left behind by his conquerors. Serchortium, we must return to that distant land, to the kingdom of gold and ebony. Tururi, when Memnon first took the throne from his fallen brother Emethion, he inherited a land touched by the gods, but also scarred by the heroes of the north. His early reign was not vague because it was uneventful. It was vague because it was a time of deliberate, focused consolidation. Turmankuri, he had to rebuild the trust of his people, shaken by the sudden loss of their king at the hands of the famed Heracles. Memnon, unlike Emathion, was cautious. He was a king who listened. Turmaf, he would sit under the great trees, the wild trees of all classes, and hear the petitions of his people. He oversaw the trade of gold, ensuring its great abundance enriched his kingdom rather than just attracting thieves. He trained his armies, not for conquest, but for protection. Wehi, He understood the blood in his veins, the line of Laomedon, connected him to a volatile world beyond his borders.